Hello and welcome to Soul Guide Society, where we take you on a journey of self-discovery as we explore a wide range of topics from the basics of astrology and energy work to deeper mysteries of consciousness and spirituality. My name is Pathway Light by Corey.
And my name is Larina Alliance, and through our insightful discussions and practical exercises, we aim to demystify these concepts and empower you to integrate them into your daily life for greater awareness, healing, and personal growth.
And as a disclaimer, unless otherwise stated, no one on this podcast is a medical, legal, or financial professional, and content discussed should not be taken as a replacement for medical, legal, or financial professional advice.
You know what I love about this specifically is this recording is going to be the mentor and mentee recording. So it's going to be like also on top of us talking to all of you about astrology, you are going to see what I have learned and how good of a teacher Corey is. So, or that I'm just a terrible student. We'll see.
No, hopefully it'll be a really good representation of what you have learned. God,
Absolutely.
please let it be. Anyways, for my reputation.
Goddesses, please let it be.
All three of you, on both of our ends. And if you don't know what we're referring to, listen to the
our
last
last
podcast episode. Yeah. But yeah, so today we will be talking about astrology and demystifying astrology. I feel like a lot of people know just enough about astrology to read a horoscope and say, oh yeah, that's my horoscope. But a lot of people don't actually resonate with them. So we're going to talk a little bit about why is it that people don't necessarily resonate with their horoscopes, while other people do. And we're going to be talking about astrology as a whole, and kind of what it is and how you can use it and the vast versatility that exists within astrology as well. So
Yeah, I'm so excited to just kind of lay out my knowledge and really just see where I am in knowing about this, because I feel like I know a lot very deeply. I've done astrological readings, but I've never like just laid everything out. So it's going to be really fun to go over this and also talk about things that I've just noticed and how much different it is now compared to when all I knew were sun signs and horoscopes.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And some people don't even know what sun signs are. Like you're like, oh, what's your sun sign? And they're like, I don't know, I'm an Aries.
I think someone said like on a video, someone was like, uh, sacral bottle. What they meant was Sagittarius, but they couldn't remember what a Sagittarius was. And I was like,
Sacral
oh,
bottle.
okay.
Oh boy. Yes. Well, anyways, most people, so let's start out with what most people know is your zodiac sign, right? So if somebody came up to you and they said, hey, what's your zodiac sign? Most likely what you know to be your zodiac sign is actually your sun sign, right? And this is the position that the sun appeared to be in from our perspective on Earth, at the time that you were born. So that is the essential embodiment of what your zodiac sign is that your sun sign. But there's so much more beyond just your sun sign. I mean, it
Yeah.
goes into your emotions can be found within your moon sign, and Mercury talks about your communication and your intellect and your
And
understanding.
Saturn tries to fight you.
Yes, Saturn always tries to fight you. Saturn brings challenges and restrictions and restraints. So no matter what planet or celestial body you're looking at, there is a correlated interpretation. Now, what that interpretation is, that kind of varies a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds confusing, but depending on what culture you're looking at, right? Depending on whether or not you're looking at Western astrology versus Eastern astrology, and also what time period you're looking at it. If you're looking at it, 2000 years ago versus if you're looking at it today, there's vast differences in the way that astrology is approached and the significations of each of the planets and what they mean. And part of that is because our observation and understanding of these celestial bodies and of these signs change as we discover things and as we make more and more observations of the transits and of things that are existing within the sky. So
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. But no, yeah, no, I, I think that to a certain extent for me, that was really significant actually now, right? Because looking back, just knowing about Neptune moving into Aries, right? And that this is the first time it's been in Aries in 164 years, So again, a long, long, long time ago, there would have been something that maybe a planet experienced or we experienced because of the transits then that we don't experience until, 164 years later. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just a type of person that kind of breeds. And that's what we're going to talk about today is the difference between a little bit of that traditional versus modern, and just kind of breaking down what astrology is as a whole. So let's start with what is astrology to you, Larina? Because for me, I feel like I've kind of got into it a little bit, but what is its perspective from you?
Astrology has been honestly a savior. Honestly, it has been the the bigger picture that I needed to see, right? When you are able to work with or look at your chart or the current transits or whatever it is that you want to look at, because you can look at like progressions and things like that. But let's just say the chart and current transits. When you are able to do that, it kind of gives a more profound understanding to what is going on around you without it being like, this is what's going to happen. Oh my gosh. It's more like, this is what could be going on in our collective. And this is possibly what's aiding in your stress or what's aiding in, your success. And this is how now you can work with it. The planets will essentially where they're at and where they are within signs, within houses, kind of helps you navigate where you specifically can be, and that has helped me significantly in different chapters of my life. More recently, like trying to figure out, what I want to do with my business. I've been a little clouded when I wasn't clouded a couple weeks ago. But it turns out that Mercury, which is the planet of thought processes and talking and communication and understanding things, went retrograde into Pisces, which is Pisces is very elusive, very spiritual, very up there. And retrograde is already very chaotic. So my thought processes about my business at the time, and that kind of transited in my second house, which is about my financial status and many other things, but that in general. Um, uh that transit, that's how I was feeling. I wasn't going with the flow. I was very, very worried about my finances. I felt very chaotic when I was just fine not too long ago. As soon as I looked at the charts and saw that that is what was happening, that Mercury was in retrograde in that house, in that sign, um for me specifically, I was able to say, okay, clearly I need to flow because Pisces is a flowing chart, a flowing sign, right? Clearly I need to stop fighting against whatever it is I'm fighting against right now. And I need to allow, because it was old thoughts that were coming up, old things that I'd gone through. I need to allow myself to let loose and let go of these thoughts and just go the way I'd been going in general instead of moving backwards, which is what I was doing. So it just gave me another option and another roadmap or a pathway on this roadmap to go, which is something that I needed.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a savior. It's been like okay, you're looking at it one way. How about we look at it with all of these options on your chart?
Yeah. And that's one thing that I've been trying to find a good analogy to kind of put astrology as a whole. Like, how can I compare astrology analyses to someone and give them a gist of what it can do for them? And I think the best analogy that I've come up with so far is it's similar to a weather report, right? Whereas getting your astrology birth chart read, because what you're doing in astrology, at least with natal charts, right? Because just talking about just basic astrology, if you go to an astrologer and you say, I want to know more about my birth chart, what they're going to ask for is your date of birth, your time of birth, and your location of birth, because all of that is very important down to the minute, right? So most of the time, if you don't know your time of birth, most of the time you can find it on your birth certificate, or the hospital that you were born at most of the time has a record of it. If not, there are astrological techniques that allow us to work backwards to determine a time of birth, but that's a whole separate conversation entirely. But rather, the importance of that is because then they can use that information to determine, okay, where was everything in your chart? Where were all the planets? What signs were all of they in? And what houses were they in? Because there are 12 houses to an astrological chart, each correlating to an area of life. So my analogy is getting your birth chart read is similar to getting your own individual weather report, right?
Yeah.
It tells you where certain areas within your chart, aka where certain areas on the map are going to be experiencing more benefic or favorable energy versus where they're going to be experiencing more malefic or challenging energy. Where can you look at internally to discover your Mercury or your intelligence or your communication? And you would look at Mercury for that. And again, depending on whether or not you're taking it from the approach of a modern astrologer or a Hellenistic or ancient astrologer, they're going to be two different things, because the ancient astrologer is going to look at events. They're going to look at, okay, Mercury talks about travel, it talks about communication, like your actual ability to talk. It talks about your short distance travel, how you engage with your direct environment. Whereas right now, it's talking about how you absorb information, how you interact with your environment, right? Rather than that short distance travel. I take the approach of looking at both and considering both. How does it affect you psychologically? How does it affect you physically, right? And then how do you blend those two? Because I do think there's something to be said within both the physical and the psychological, the external and the internal.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that to a certain, and also it shows it if we talk about Mercury in general, where we don't just see psychological things happening, we see things happening like our cars acting up, like our phones acting up, like our computer, our technology, physical technology acts up, or something happens. People get in crashes more often when Mercury is in retrograde. I don't know if that's statistically proven yet, but it's definitely something I've noticed. But so it does have to be, you do have to have a physical understanding to your charts, not just psychological. For another example, really quickly, I needed to get out of that mindset of that, may have been aided by Venus and Mercury in retrograde. So I moved over to Mars in Cancer. Mars is transiting my sixth house in Cancer. And so I decided to, go and clean and take care of my home, and my place of community, right? And I decided to also turn on some music because Cancer is a moving, in my opinion. I gotta move. I gotta move. Pisces is a very moving sign as well. So I gotta move. I gotta get my emotions out through moving. And I say emotions, and I'm just showing off what Corey has taught me, but I say emotions because Cancer's ruler is the moon. So emotions was super significant in getting those out, and that really helped. I moved away from the energy of the retrograde and into something that wasn't retrograding and put action towards that, because Mars is the action planet. Anyway, done bragging. But yes, it is very physical. There are very physical aspects to zodiacs, those to astrology in general. It is not just psychological.
Right, right. But I do think there is something to be said about the psychological as well.
Mhm.
I just think a blended approach is probably the best. So, and you're, just kind of learning about astrology, a lot of research that you're going to do, at least modern day, is going to talk about the psychological aspect of things, but you need to understand it does extend beyond that. And there are also numerous cultures. There are multiple different branches of astrology out there. There is Hellenistic astrology. There's a form of astrology called queer astrology, where they literally just study astrology and how that connects to the LGBTQIA plus community and how it branches into that. There is a form of astrology called accounting astrology or marketing astrology. There are numerous different kinds of astrology that all branch off from generally the same sources, which stem back to Egyptian and Mesopotamian origins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's super cool. I do. I think it's awesome. Um, Now, I feel like kind of moving into debunking, right? Because now that you know that there's so many different types of astrology, there are many different things that you might look at, and you might not know what really works for you, right? There could be some of you are on different apps, and those apps have I've noticed through some of my readings, and it has confused the hell out of me until I've asked Corey for help. But some of those apps have different ways of showing you your houses. They have different ways of showing you your signs. There are really different kinds of astrology, and I think it's super important to know that, because knowing that there are different kinds, as we were saying, different kinds of astrology means that whatever really fits you and works for you is going to depend on where you're at.
Yes.
Because I believe Eastern, correct? Eastern astrology is a little bit different than Western astrology, a lot different than Western astrology. So you may learn that you're a different sign, and I believe it's astrology
Vedic.
Vedic astrology than you are in Hellenistic astrology, right? So there's a lot of nuance to that as well. Astrology, just there's so much to learn, and it can come back down to what really fully embodies you. And I think over time we're going to learn ways to mix it in together to make the sciences make sense even more. But I think we're going to go mainly over our Hellenistic astrology on, on this channel.
Yeah. I mean, originally, astrology was used as what they thought to be a communication with the gods,
Yep.
right? They thought that the stars were a handwritten map to what events were going to transpire. And I think that this is an important thing to touch on, because when people start learning astrology, well, they start to think, well, does that mean astrology causes things to happen? And that's not the case. Rather, astrology tells you about the stories or events that may unfold during that period. Like I said, it's similar to a weather report. Just as a weatherman does not cause the tornado to touch down, it simply reports on the conditions that led up to that moment, right? And it's very similar with astrology. We don't necessarily tell you, okay, you're going to get famous on this day, but what we can tell you is that your north node, your sun, your Mercury, and the ruler of your ascendant all seem to be lining up on this day in that exact area. So something beneficial may happen, right? So we can tell you about upcoming energies, but we may not be able to say, okay, yeah, you're going to get famous, or you're going to hit the jackpot, or you're going to get a raise on this specific day. We can just tell you an archetypal energy of what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's why I like to say people, well, first of all, I like to say horoscopes are extremely vague. Horoscopes are not going to tell you exactly what's going on. They're going to tell you pieces of what you might be dealing with in this time based off of your usually sun sign only.
Yes.
And that is more often than not why a lot of people don't necessarily resonate with horoscopes, right? Because not resonating with a horoscope, maybe like it's because it's not talking about your specific chart. It's talking about a collective energy more often than not that it's noticed, right? That it sees in wherever your sun sign is currently at.
Right. Right. And that's also a cultural thing too, right? Because in Western astrology, we put so much emphasis on the sun sign, but in Eastern astrology and a lot of Indian cultures, they focus a lot more on the ascendant rather than the sun sign. So if you ask somebody, hey, what's your sign? they would respond with their ascendant rather than their sun sign. And I've actually kind of strayed to a similar belief where I believe that the ascendant might have a little bit more of an importance on the individual rather than the sun sign would. So again, when you're touching back on horoscopes, the horoscopes, yes, they do directly sometimes relate to some people, but for some people it doesn't tie in because what's happening in that person's life pertains to maybe their Mercury placement, which is conjunct their ascendant, or just something more influential than just their sun placement. Because your sun placement is like 1/18th of your chart, right? There's so much more, and actually 1/18th is like even narrowing it down. It's like 1/200th of your chart.
Yeah.
There's so much more
Yeah.
involved than just your sun sign.
Yeah, and I think that's super important to know because I think the big art, what I've learned as an astrologer coming out of being someone who was very, what is my sun sign? You know, what is happening in my horoscope? What is my, you know, like all of that, and not knowing anything else about any other signs was that it is, it was, it now makes so much sense to me why there are so many people on the outs when it comes to astrology who are like, absolutely not, that has nothing to do with me, I don't even know what any of that means, like. And it's really because we as a culture and as a society, dating back to the wars, um, we have used astrology and we've defined it as one thing, one very pop cultured thing, when it really isn't. And because of that, we have decided this is how people are going to be, or this is what they're going to show us, this is how they all act. And that more often than not is not what you, how you, well, first of all, that is just not how you read astrology, someone's astrology in general. And it's not what you're supposed to do with astrology anyway. You're not supposed to decide this is exactly how someone is going to be.
Yeah, no. And that's a good point. Astrology can help you understand yourself, but it cannot tell you who you are.
Mm-mm.
It can help you understand how you communicate. It can help you understand how you love or what your value system is, but it cannot tell you or answer the question of, okay, who are you? Right? It can help lead you to those answers, but it cannot be the answer. But astrology is the pathway to those answers because when you understand how you communicate and when you understand your value system, when you understand how you emotionally react to things, that is what allows you to have the highest possibility of self actualization, right? When you can reach that point of truly understanding yourself and bringing yourself to your highest potential, right? That's where astrology can help you. And that's where you can also find yourself. You can find yourself through that highest potential, but astrology is the path that can lead you there.
Yeah. I think there's a specific thing within astrology that, or within clients that come in for an astrology reading, that has always kind of boggled my mind. And it's, you know, wanting to know not why something is happening, but what's going to happen in the future. You know, like it's very much so this idea of like
We're looking for an
getting,
oracle.
yeah, like getting answers, right? Getting answers, just to get answers and be like, wow, that's so true. And then like, that's all. And it's like they don't, you don't, this is one of the biggest things that like it bothers, it gets under my skin is like, okay, like I'm telling you, I'm reading this about you, and you're like, oh my god, that's so true about me, and 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 then you leave and you didn't take anything with you. Like all you were like is like, oh, that was so magical, thank you. And it's like, astrology is more than that. Astrology is going to aid you. Our readings are to aid you into your next steps, what you're going to be doing next, why things are happening, and how you can navigate through stressors or how you can navigate through successes, right? And it just it gets me when we're just like amazed by the wow factor, because yes, it is amazing, but it's also applicable.
Yes, absolutely. And the applicable piece from it comes from, it's not just us looking at the chart and divinating something off of intuition. You know, there are actual correlated pieces of this. The history of astrology dates back to the 20th century BCE, right? And even further than that, that's just as far back as recorded history goes that we can find. It goes back centuries, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and we've taken observations and learned from these observations from the people that came before us. You know, Project Hindsight that came about in early 2000s. That was literally an entire project dedicated to taking old astrological text and translating them and interpreting them into modern language so that we can understand and reconceptualize some of these old astrological techniques that for thousands of years that had been lost. So there are so many things within astrology. It's such a deep well of things. We could sit here and we can go over, you know, every aspect, but that would take hours and hours and hours.
So how about we just go over the easiest ones that they can understand?
Yes, yeah. So the biggest things that we really need to break down is, okay, when an astrologer looks at your chart, what are they looking at, right? What is your astrology wheel? And I feel like there's an astrology trend going around where it's like, okay, astrology girlies, tell me what's wrong with my life, and then it has like a picture of their chart. Or the worst thing is the lists. I hate those lists where it has like the list of where the planets are, and then the houses, and then what signs. It's the worst. Send us the wheel. Astrologers can't do anything with those lists. Send us the wheel. So anyways, going back into it, when we're looking, the first thing that we're looking at is we're trying to look at the whole wheel and understand, okay, what are the placements? So each of the placements tell us, you know, basically activity, what activity is happening. Whereas the house that it's sitting in tells us what area of life that activity is occurring within your overall nativity, right? Then what sign it's in tells us the quality of that activity. So let's take Mercury, because we've been using Mercury as an example a lot here, okay? Let's say your Mercury was in Aries in the third house. I don't know why I said third house, but I think it's because you have third house Aries.
I do have Mercury in my third house, and you're coming for me because it's also in Aries.
Oh, okay. Anyways, so let's say you have
but this is
Mercury.
good. This is like, it's an accurate representation. So I can
Yes,
say, yes, you're right, you know, so.
Yeah. So Mercury Aries in the third house, the first thing that I would look at, okay, so the activity, that's Mercury. So the Mercury activity is going to be communication, intellect, how you absorb information, how you communicate that information, and how you exchange that information with the world around you. The next thing that I would look at is, okay, what area of life is this sitting in, right? And for the third house, that is sitting in the area of life concerning communication and concerning exchange of information and concerning siblings and the direct environment around you and neighbors, right? So I would say that communication is generally going to be centered potentially around the direct environment. There's going to be some level of high activity because the third house is engagement with the environment as well as communication and information gathering. So there's going to be high information processing. And then the quality of that would be defined by Aries. And Aries is very kind of strong-headed. It's very quick moving. It can be irrational and impulsive, but it can also be very passionate and very kind of, some people would call it hot-headed, but ultimately it just comes to a level of like a ram, it sets its head forward and charges forward. And that's how I would describe your communication pattern just looking at that alone.
Right. And to you know, like, just really hone in on that specific description, I can say with the way I speak, the way I think, it's very fast paced. It's very, I might say something before I think it through. It's very just allowing myself to chatter without maybe processing everything that's, you know, that I'm thinking about. And also in that same regard, my communication is also very passionate. More often than not, if I'm serious about something, I'm serious about it. It's like I'm not going to stop until it's understood. um and I go after my passions. I'm not my passions, my thought processes. Like if I have an idea, I'm just going to go after it. I'm not going to think about it, and that's very much so a Mercury and Aries characteristic, is like this quick-witted, very fast, very about to do something, going, not even going to think about what the consequences are, about to say something, not going to think about what is coming out of your mouth before you say it. Very early on in my life, that was super super significant. So yes, it's the finding the accuracies with the specific planet. It has literally nothing to do with my sun, although my sun is in Aries. It has nothing to do with my sun. It is we're talking about how I talk, we're talking about how I communicate, we're talking about how I connect, when it comes to thought processes and ideas and things like that. And it is very Aries driven.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's the thing, is there's like 13 other positions beyond just your Mercury, right?
Mhm.
So that's just kind of an initial breakdown of what an astrologer is looking at, but then there's more things. There's so much more, right? They're looking at aspects. You probably have heard of aspects if you've done some research into astrology. And aspects essentially are, how do the positions, how do the placements, how do the planets, how do they interact with each other, right? How is if we're using the same thing of like it's a weather report, right? How is town A and how is town B interacting with each other? Are they cutting each other off? Are they supporting each other? Are they not caring about each other entirely, acting independently from each other? Are they,
Making
in a
it worse.
feud against each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's so much that astrology can tell you, but there are aspects and there are retrogrades. You've probably heard about retrogrades. Retrogrades are simply the planet moving backwards from our perspective, which is taking whatever energy it's associated with and making it obscured and chaotic. So
Mhm.
again, Mercury, for example, everybody talks about Mercury going retrograde. Well, that's because it goes retrograde most often out of all of the planets. It goes retrograde about 3.14 times a year. Very mathematical. Again, serves to support the themes of Mercury as a whole. But when it goes retrograde, we have issues with our car. We have issues with our phone, which is communication. We have
Yeah.
issues with communication and with plans and with organization. All of those things start to become more challenging. People's
Yeah.
cars break down. You are right. I don't know if it's statistically proven, but again, I feel like more accidents happen when Mercury is
Yeah.
retrograde. Um,
Okay, so I'm throwing a theory in here, okay, just a little bit. So in the beginning of what we spoke about, we said that astrology does not make things happen. It essentially just kind of aids in them. And in that moment, I was thinking about, or not even aids, like it gives you an idea of um what the energy is going to feel like, and what you can do with it, right?
yeah,
Now,
indicator.
yes. Um, in the moment that we were talking about that, I was actually thinking about your retrograde explanation, where the simplest, little example of what this could look like is when you're sitting in a car and there's a truck beside you. As you said, there's a truck beside you. This is what retrograde looks like to Earth, right? There's a truck beside you, and you guys know that feeling of when you're sitting in a car and a truck is moving, but your car is not moving, but because of the perspective of the truck, it feels like you're moving backwards. And so the idea essentially is from ours where we sit, where the planet, the way the planets are moving, make it seem like they're moving, make them look like they're moving a different way, right? And that can skew energetically, that can skew our energy. Now I was thinking, I was thinking about that in the sense that in that truck, nothing is happening to in that car, nothing is happening to you. The only thing that's happening is that you feel like things are happening. And that is kind of the idea here, is like nothing is directly like affecting you in a way that um like you're being physically harmed or anything like that, right? More often than not, what it is your brain is like, wait, what is going on and how do I work through this and understand it? And that is, I feel like, is the idea of a retrograde. It's like,
Yes.
wait, what is going on and how do I break it down and understand it?
Yes. And things just become more obscured. So part of the argument that some astrologers have had is that there aren't necessarily more car accidents, or there aren't necessarily more crashes as a result of it. But what ends up happening is when Mercury goes retrograde, our brains, like our plans, our processing
Mm-hmm.
goes right out the door, pretty much. So as we're driving, our ability to make, split second rational decisions to avoid accidents becomes obscured in a way.
Yep.
So sometimes it can lead to a very literal sense of an accident.
Yeah.
I've seen it in somebody's chart where unfortunately there was a Mars Mercury conjunction, and Mars is the planet of action, also explosion, also slicing and hot, and Mercury is the planet of transit and movement. Unfortunately for them, that specific alignment, again, it didn't cause it, but it was an indication of what energy could be present. And what was present at that moment was a collision that ultimately ended up in her car bursting into flames within seconds of her getting out of the vehicle.
Right. And you just actually kind of helped. That's crazy. But you just actually kind of helped me finalize this little bit of a theory, I guess I have, that because of the obstacle of the truck moving backwards, like the retrograde of the of the truck moving forward and you feeling like you're moving backwards, your body or yourself or your mind might react to that. And
Right.
in reacting to that, you could cause a crash or you could hurt yourself or something could happen. So it is affecting, and I hate, like, I'm not saying this with all solid scientific facts, right? But it is affecting energy, like, in one way or another, and that is why we notice things more, or we see that things are happening more. Um, yeah, yeah. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Things happen a little bit more obscured, or things happen a little bit more what seems to be out of our control, right? And that's the things with retrograde.
Yeah.
But retrograde, it also offers a unique kind of reflection point, right? As much as it can bring chaos, it also brings reflection, right?
Mhm.
Oftentimes, what happens during Mercury retrograde is things that you missed or things that you may have ignored prior to Mercury retrograde come right up for you to face during your Mercury retrograde. There's no chance of avoiding it, right?
Mhm.
Saying, oh, you know what? That light has been on in my vehicle for a couple of months. I'll just leave it. Mercury retrograde hits, and now you're stranded on the side of the road for 4 hours waiting for AAA to come and get you. So, oftentimes, it can bring up things that you were ignoring, right? It is quite literally, like I said, from our perspective, the planet going backwards. It's like you passed over it that first time, ignoring it. The planet saying, "Oh, nope, we're putting this in reverse, and we're gonna readdress those problems." It's
Yeah.
putting it in reverse, and then it's putting it back in drive so that you can address it and face them going forward again.
Yes.
So retrogrades, yes, they do bring chaos. They do bring a little bit of that obscured energy of whatever planet they're affecting, but they give you a unique opportunity to kind of reflect inwards, right? It's a powerful tool available to us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I've noticed it personally in my life, and I also notice it observed in others, like just sitting and watching how others kind of change in their reactions or kind of don't know how to react to certain things. So it can happen, it can affect us collectively, it can affect us personally, but I love the idea of it being a place where you can reflect and you can figure out what's working for you, what's not working for you, what you need to let go of, and things of that sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
While also
Mercury is not the
understanding.
only planet that goes retrograde, guys.
Yes, no. The only two things that don't go retrograde is when we're talking about celestial bodies, are the sun and the moon, right?
Yeah.
Because if they went retrograde, something has gone very seriously wrong with our gravitational system and our
Yeah.
orbit system.
First of all, where's the
um,
sun going? It can't be going
yeah.
behind the sun.
Yeah. And in which case, none of us are here to be concerned about that.
No.
So the only planets that go retrograde are like Venus, Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, pretty much all of them go retrograde except for the sun and the moon, because they're considered luminaries. They're not considered planets, obviously. They're considered luminaries.
Yeah.
But any of the planets, they do go retrograde, and they do go through a similar cycle, and they do all offer that chance to really look inward and understand yourself. And that's what astrology offers as a whole anyways. It's just an ability to look inward and understand yourself and understand your path a little bit more.
1,000%. Yeah. Um, I also want to say there are, and I don't know if we touched on this necessarily, but each planet has its own specifics, right? Like each planet has its, like Mercury has its own specifics with talking, Venus has its own, or with communication, etc. Venus has its own specifics with values, etc. So you're always going to, no matter what you come to in your chart, you're always going to have specifics that you want to look deeper into. It is not all just one solid thing, though you can get a good small chunk of understanding with just your big three. We always go back to the big three in pop culture, unfortunately. Your big three being your rising, which I think we've been saying ascending. I don't know if we said rising at all. So if you don't know what the ascendant is and you haven't Googled it yet, it is rising. And your rising, your moon, and your sun are your quote unquote big three planets.
Yeah. Yeah. Your sun, moon, rising. People talk about your big three. That is what they were talking about. Ascendant and rising are the same thing. They're synonymous for the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
it refers to whatever sign is rising over the eastern horizon at the time of your birth. Right. So essentially it's saying like at the time of your birth, if you were to look directly over the eastern horizon, that's the planet that you would see creeping over it. Or not the planet, that's the sign that you would see creeping over that eastern horizon. So your ascendant and your rising becomes a huge piece of it. Same thing with your sun and your moon, but it does extend far beyond that. And it's definitely something that you should always look into, whether or not you're learning about astrology to be able to give an analysis out to other people, or if you're just trying to learn about yourself. I always recommend talking to an astrologer, right? Have an astrologer give you a perspective on your chart. Even if you've already had an astrologer read your chart, have them read it again. Always go back to your astrologers. I don't just say that because I'm an astrologer. I say that because it's just constant. It's good to constantly have that uptake. You know, what is transiting through the sky right now? Because yes, you do have your birth chart, but the planets continue to move.
Yeah.
You need to understand what is currently happening in the sky and how does that affect you. So continuously seeing an astrologer is something that I definitely recommend if you're not planning on researching it yourself.
Yeah, and you would be amazed as to what astrology actually covers, because we're not just talking about like when you were born and, you know, where you were born, although that will be the starting points. We are also talking about what is currently happening now, as he said, what could happen next year. Not only that, there are different kinds of astrology, deeply different kinds of astrology, like location. There's I think it's cartography astrology or something
Yep.
like that. Um,
Astrocartography.
Astrocartography, yeah, and that talks about good places to live or places where you might excel more or not excel more, like energies that you'll feel in those places. So there are so many significant ways to use
There's even,
astrology.
yeah, there's even forensic astrology,
Mm-hmm.
which is literally about taking details from a case, like where did it happen? When did it potentially happen? Who was potentially involved, right? Looking at the astrology of the event and the people involved and everything, and trying to find evidence or solve a case from that. And there have actually been a few, obviously, they don't the problem is similar to mediumship. If you walk into a police station and you're like, I solved this mystery because of this, they don't necessarily take it as seriously. So there haven't been a ton of reported solved cases as a result of it, but there are a bunch out there. There are some out there that you can find. So it is real. Like you said, there are a ton of different types of astrology out there, right?
Yeah.
So
So
don't
yeah,
limit
just
yourself.
pick your poison, but definitely enjoy it. Because it's worth it, and it's very, very helpful, especially when you aren't just going in for a quick update, but like going in to really deeply understand the energy in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you have any other things you wanted to talk about for this or
Not necessarily. I think that we've pretty much covered a big chunk of the basics of astrology. and just like people understanding it. We really just want you guys to know that it's not, I do want to say that it's not us worshiping any planets. I think that's a very big misunderstanding when it comes to astrology for for different religions. It is believed that like we like listen and talk to the planets and worship them in a way that is ridiculous. So I do want to say that that is not what happens here, and I think that we have explained that to a great extent.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate it a bit, we don't do that.
Yeah. No. No.
But no, I think that's a really good place to end this, is to know that there are different kinds of astrology, and uh, meeting up with your astrologer and really looking for information to apply to your life is what this is for. And it's very significant.
Yes, absolutely. And the only other thing I want to mention is if you are interested in studying Western Hellenistic astrology, there's a few resources I'll recommend for you. First is Parker's Astrology. It's a big red book. That was literally one of my first books on astrology. It's great. If you're looking for something a little bit more intellectually challenging, Vedius Valens, The Anthology, as well as William Lilly's Christian Astrology. Those are both good resources. But ultimately, the best resource that I can advise is Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology, the study of fate and fortune. That's something that it is absolutely amazing. In my mentees, people that I have take my class, I have them get that book as a required reading material, just because it is just such phenomenal information, and it just goes into such depth into the history, into the rich, information behind Western astrology. And then just as a small brag, I know we've brought it up a couple of times, but if you are interested in studying astrology and you are looking for a mentorship, I do offer a mentorship program that actually at the time of when we release this, I'll be still taking applications for my beginner's course. So if you're interested in learning about astrology, definitely head to my website, pathwaylightbycorey.com. Head to the mentorship tab and apply as soon as you can. The first class is going to start on July 7th. It'll be Mondays from 7 to 9:30 Eastern time every week. So like I said, definitely check that out if you're interested in a live program.
Yeah, I just, as someone who has taken that class and is significantly more in tune with astrology and the transits and just the stars in general, as someone who has talked to the stars since she was a child, this just got me a lot closer to it, and it was very in-depth. It was one of the most in-depth classes I have taken for anything in a long time, and it's very personable as well. So I would highly recommend you guys, if you can, take Corey's class. It is absolutely beautiful, and you are going to learn a lot, and you will be doing homework. So, well, you'll have a choice, but do the homework because it's definitely worth it, and it helps things stick in your head a little longer. So
Yeah,
all right.
absolutely. All right, I think that's all. If you guys have any questions, you always know where to contact us. But in the meantime, definitely please drop your, not to be the stereotypical, but drop your sun, moon, rising in the comments. That way there we can kind of just get a gauge of who's checking this out. Give us a little bit of an idea
It's
of,
your big three.
yeah, your big three.
All right, guys. Again, it's always great to be talking to you guys. I can't wait to hear back from you, and we will speak soon.
Yes, and next week's or next month's podcast episode, just so you can tune into that one, is also going to be based off of divination. We don't specifically know what yet, but we know it's going to be surrounding divination. So if you're interested in divination as a whole, stay tuned for next month's episode.
Yes, we will speak to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.
This has been Soul Guide Society. I'm Larina Aligned, and you can find me at larina.aligned on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
And I'm Pathway Light by Corey, and you can find me at pathwaylightbycorey.com. We thank you for walking the path to alignment with us.
Till next time.